Right, let's continue with our second fireside here on stage one here at Sustainability Live London. And I'm delighted to welcome a guest who joined me very recently on a webinar, so it's actually nice to see you in 3D. I'm joined by Cara Williams, Global Head of Climate and Sustainability at Mercer. And our topic is a global view on sustainability. A warm welcome for Cara, please. Mm-hmm. Right, let's start with the role of innovation in this conversation, because this is something I personally find fascinating, and that's how you see new tech, financial products, things like green bonds, carbon credits, impact funds, that list could go on. How do you see that shaping the future of sustainable investing?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost, most important thing that we need to see as far as innovation goes is scalability. The ability for more people to invest in sustainability and things that are impactful with intention. So, at the most sort of institutional level, I think the thing that is the most important has been blended finance. And blended finance effectively means like an impact investment that could potentially benefit a community. It could be, if you think of, New Orleans, building, working on the dikes and making sure that those are higher. You kind of go, where's the financial benefit to that? So effectively what happens is there's a first tranche, which isn't profitable, and that gets taken basically off the table. So then all the positive, where there would be revenue flows, because businesses can now thrive, new businesses can open right next to where those dikes might be. That part is where people start investing. And if you don't do the blended finance, no one's going to invest, right? So you're starting to see a lot more of that. Every time you go to COP, the conversations around blended finance have been extremely important and have actually been coming to fruition, which is really unique.
If we can just stick with the idea of blended finance and scalability, it's always a nice target. It's something you want to aspire to and achieve. How do you do that, particularly on a global scale? Because different regions have different pressures, priorities, industries. How can that be done on a global scale?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest challenge, and obviously if we think about impact investment, where most impact investment is needed is in the emerging markets, which frankly just don't have the visibility and don't get the visibility. This is where I guess I'd be the biggest proponent of asset managers, right? Because an asset manager is the one who's going to have the most access, the most ability to be able to identify and find these investment opportunities. They'll be the ones who can deleverage and take some of the risk off the table for investors. Again, while it's not particularly sexy or exciting, if you're not a family office with a lot of money, the best thing is to find emerging market investors. There are loads that are focused in this area.
Well, let's stick with the idea about investment and investment strategy. And I'm sure everyone's looking for something that's bold, maybe a little unconventional, the silver bullet that can deliver both financially and when it comes to sustainability. Does that exist? Is there a magic idea out there? Are we still looking for it? What's your take on that?
There's definitely no silver bullet. The lady from BAT before, I think there's a lot to be said and a lot to be done in investing. I think we've all seen that just the use of pesticides and the use of mass farming, that land is no longer actually particularly productive. And what you're seeing in a lot of the agri-investment is organizations that are coming in and converting these farms back to being more sustainable, less usage of chemical products, teaching farmers how they can actually farm in a more sustainable way, ultimately improving their yields so that the land is actually more productive. It's also most often not as impacted by extreme climate events. Land becomes more resilient when it actually is let to grow naturally. There are more and more opportunities to invest in agriculture, and again, it doesn't even have to be in emerging markets. In the United States, even we have a lot of opportunities to invest in companies that are converting blueberry farms to organic, and again, the impact on just local environments and bees and then even on the communities, on the people who actually work these farms has been really positive.
Yeah, if only was that silver bullet, we would probably wrap things up now and be on the networking drinks already, but that's still to be found, unfortunately. A key theme that I often find that comes up during these conversations is proper C-suite buy-in. You know, the CEO, the top level of the business. For you, what's the most powerful, maybe non-financial thing a CEO can do to make sustainability really at the core, watermarks to the whole business?
Yeah, so at Mercer, for those of us, those of you who don't know us that well, we have a large investment arm, but we also have a large HR consulting called our health business and our career businesses. So we work with a lot of companies at the corporate level and sort of integrating sustainability into the corporate culture. And we all know, if the CEO doesn't truly believe it, right? And I mean genuinely believe it, you're not going to see anything move. Recently I was speaking with a woman who's the head of sustainability at a huge transportation organization that everybody receives packages from in this room probably, and their CEO is completely bought in. So if there's going to be a new van that needs to be bought, a manager will see what that what the carbon output is. They will see what the impact is on the local community in order to buy this thing. What are the sacrifices for any kind of local investment that they normally would do? So there's an entire sort of ESG aspect to every aspect of their business. And it's truly because the CEO believes in it and makes it very clear to the entire organization. So for us, as soon as we speak to an organization and you meet a chief sustainability officer, if you see frustration in their eyes, they're not actually going to be able to implement much. And the way obviously the politics are going these days, particularly in the United States, you're starting to see which organizations really truly believed and are sticking to it, and some are being very vocal, particularly on some of their social issues. And then you see the ones who are quite frankly very happy that this conversation is being taken off the table and they're stepping back. My guess is in 3 or 4 years, hopefully investors are going to start to speak with where they're putting their money.
I know what you're saying about that look in the eye of the suffering chief sustainability officer. And I know we've had this conversation before. When I first started doing sustainability events, the number of times you'd go for questions from the audience and you'd get the slightly sad hand going up saying, I'm really passionate about this, but I just can't get anyone in the business to listen to me. I see less of that now, and it almost seems slightly quaint, some of that thought process. But if you're still seeing elements of that now, when you're not getting true belief from the top of a company, what can be done? The obvious answer is the business case. Is there anything else on top of the business case to get that buy-in from the top, from your experience?
Ultimately, because I come out of our investment side, money talks, right? So there's shareholder money, there's shareholder pressure, there's consumer money, there's consumer pressure. So genuinely, if you have a CEO that's not particularly interested, if you can't prove the financial rationale to taking care of your environment, your communities where you're operating, and obviously just general governance, you're going to be pretty hard pressed to be able to sell that conversation.
Well, let's talk greenwashing for a moment, because I know if it's a subject I don't bring up, someone else puts their hand up, asks the question, and asks it an awful lot better than I do. The investment industry always faces growing criticism about greenwashing. How for you are Mercer helping clients move beyond maybe more superficial ESG claims, things that might sound good, that aren't necessarily the real deal, to really achieve genuine, measurable impacts? What's your advice and thoughts there?
So I think in the past the easy excuse was the data's not there, right? So you weren't able to prove whether or not what you're doing was good. That's changed. I think data has gotten much better, and it's a lot easier to measure. Certainly environmental. There's no question. There's so much information now available that you can really get pretty good line of sight on the environmental impact of whatever you're investing in. Social's getting better. It's not great, particularly if you're looking through supply chain and stuff. It starts to get a little bit complicated. I think when it comes to investments, if you're just an average Joe trying to make an investment, stay away from ESG funds. That means nothing. It's a complete misnomer. Every asset manager that's out there is looking, hopefully, at environmental, social, and governance issues, and whether or not a investment, if they want to invest in, I don't know, IBM, I'm just throwing that out. If they want to invest in IBM, they're going to look at, what is IBM's water usage for the cooling? How are they treating local people? Are there potentially going to be any lawsuits that are coming at it? So you can be cold when you're looking at ESG, right? It's not because you've got a bleeding heart. So I would say avoid ESG funds. Ensure that when you're investing, though, that you're really looking for something that's saying that sustainability is part of the investment ethos. And like I said, data now is really available, so there shouldn't be much greenwashing, and regulation has gotten pretty strict around greenwashing. I'd say now the bigger issue is more on the green hushing. So like I said before, some corporations have really decided to really be forthright in their mission around sort of environmental, social, and governance factors, and they're doubling down. You look at, I don't know, like a Target in the United States, who's made it very clear that while the United States government has been penalizing companies on diversity, Target said, we are a diverse organization, our customer base is diverse, and that is something we are going to stand behind. So I think that these issues are becoming much more obvious as to where to invest and how to invest, and your asset manager should be able to have access to that.
Well, let's stay with that expression of green hushing. Is that something I'm hearing a lot more on these kind of stages? From an investment point of view, how do you navigate that environment at the moment? Because a couple of years ago, it was a given. Everyone was heading in the same direction. Everyone seemed to be singing from the same hymn sheet. Now there seems to be some light and shade in that discussion. How, from an investment point of view, do you navigate that rather tricky environment?
Yeah, we have the benefit at Mercer, obviously, of our size. So we do have access to people who will give us the right answers and the direct answers and with the greatest transparency. Most folks don't have that ability. So that's why I say really do lean on asset managers, right? Because most asset managers do also have they have the ear, right? CEOs will have conversations with asset managers because they want them to invest in their organizations. But when it comes to green hushing, I mean, assuming, and I'm assuming just given the title of this conference, I'm assuming people will be perfectly fine with green hushing in this audience, right? These are the good stories, right? These are the good stories these organizations are trying to keep a little bit more quiet because they just don't want to get penalized, but they're on a path and they believe in their path. So again, I think the more information, and nowadays there is so much information out there that you can pretty much get a pretty good line of sight as to whether or not a company is really sticking to what they're doing, but maybe they're just not advertising it as much, which again shows that there was true authenticity rather than they were doing it for marketing reasons.
And it is such a change when before it was something that everyone was desperate to talk about, and now they're maybe having to keep it slightly quieter. You mentioned the size of Mercer, and this is something that fascinates me about how you're helping clients integrate sustainability beyond just their investment portfolio. You have the scale, you have the influence, you have the name. How does that help in improving their sustainability records just outside of their investments?
Yeah, so we work with, like I said, we work with clients in different ways. So when we work with companies, we work directly with companies who are trying to improve themselves on any aspect of environmental, social, or governance issues. So when it comes to that, I think the conversations are always about really pinpointing and getting clients to understand that they can't be everything to all people, right? So you have to choose the couple things that you are going to stand behind as an organization and that you think you can actually move a needle on. So you need to be able to measure it to begin with, but then you also need to believe that you've got the operational infrastructure in place to do that. And a lot of smaller companies, you see a lot of people signing on to things like B Corp, but B Corp is self-evaluation, so it's great, but it's self-evaluation, right? It's not exactly truly objective. So really the thing that we try to say is that you can't be everything to everyone. We need to go through a pretty difficult process of them trying to identify what aspects of environmental, social, and governance they really truly believe that they are exposed to and they can change, assuming they want to change it.
Yeah, that's a very pragmatic approach. I do want to get on to looking to the future and looking back over your years of experience in this area, but I also don't want to hog the questions. So is there anyone in the audience who has any immediate questions? Again, this is where people adjust their hair. I'm going to jump to the back of the room first. And again, as for anyone who was in here earlier, I mentioned my continued stress dream of walking to the back of the room and tripping up one of these stairs. So if everyone could hold their breath for me, I'd be very, very grateful. Oh, no, where's the hand? Was it up at the back here? No, someone's thrown me an outrageous dummy. There was a question at the front. You did that on purpose, didn't you? Just to make me come all the way to the back of the room. Right. I definitely saw a hand at the front.
That would have been easier.
Yeah. Hi there, Cara. I'm Ian from SEDEX. Just interested in, you talked about other businesses and what they're doing around sustainability and where people can make their investments, but talk about what is it that Mercer's doing? How do you measure your own sustainability outcomes? And a particular interest, being from SEDEX, is more around the social and the governance, is just things like monitoring your service providers. 'Cause I spoke to somebody earlier on today, which was a B2B organisation in IT, and the answer that came back was, well, that's, you know, that piece is more for manufacturers or farmers or something like that. But ultimately, doesn't matter what kind of company you are, you've still got suppliers, and they, whether it's the cleaning company or whether it's the aircon company or whatever it is, ultimately, how are you looking at each of those? How do you measure that? How do you collect that data?
Yeah. I guess it starts with the fact that we are a huge HR consulting organization, which means we have to kind of practice what we preach. So we are very focused on the S, if you will. And it starts at the basics, like pay equity. And we expect, we report out already on our own, but we also expect our suppliers to be able to discuss openly how they look. And if they haven't done their numbers, then we need to understand why they haven't done those numbers. The further, we can't go really far down the supply chain because, like you said, we're not a manufacturing organization. But you can certainly get down to at least one level. And we do have a dashboard, a set dashboard that we expect to be completed. And if people can't complete it, then we do question that. But we also have a pretty big focus on diversity on suppliers as well. Sort of, have you looked at your procurement options and looked at the variety of potential suppliers? Not sacrificing quality at all, but always just looking to make sure that you're really thinking about a pretty broad scope. As far as governance goes, I think for governance, we really tend to be more focused around security, things like cybersecurity and things like that, and that's also monitored. We have the benefit of our sister company being Marsh, and Marsh does something called Centrisk, which gets really into the very specific nature of particularly environmental and governance, whereas, like I said, we're probably the specialists when it comes to the social piece.
Thank you, Cara, and thank you, Ian. You're rapidly becoming my co-host here today, so just put your invoice in at the end. I'm sure the events team will pay it. One last question for me, Cara, and that's looking to the future about the biggest trends you see coming up over the next sort of decade or so within the global sustainability landscape, I guess particularly in the investment field. What are your thoughts? What do you think there will be in the next decade?
I think regulation is trying to figure itself out, but I think TNFD, so nature focused, will be really commonplace. I do believe that'll get rolled out, and most likely globally. I think the carbon credit market is going to expand into biodiversity and potentially into other areas. I do think, like that question, I do think there's going to be a lot more focus on the people aspect, how organizations and are treating their own people and the communities that they operate in, and there's going to be a lot more held to account in that space as well. So I'd say the next couple of years may look not quite as rosy, but I do think that certainly over the next 10 years, I think really truly looking at all aspects of sustainability is going to be pretty commonplace and expected.
Okay, well, Cara, I always enjoy the pleasure of your company and your insight, so thank you so much for joining us. Up next, after this session, we have our next keynote, which is with Ben Stone, the Group Head of Environmental Sustainability at Kier Group. That is up next, but for now, a huge thank you for Cara Williams.
Thank you.